Thomas came home on a warm autumn evening, the kind where the light softens everything it touches. His children ran to him. His wife's eyes brimmed with quiet relief, and the neighborhood felt whole again. But behind Thomas's steady smile and strong arms was a silence no one could reach. He unpacked his things quickly, too quickly. His uniforms were folded away, medals untouched. He didn't talk much about his time overseas, only saying, "It's good to be home," whenever someone asked. But he didn't sleep well. He'd walk the halls late at night, checking on his kids, standing quietly by their door frames as if memorizing their every breath. It was his wife, Lena, who noticed first. The way he winced when lifting their daughter, how he avoided loud noises, and how his hands trembled ever so slightly when pouring coffee. She asked once, gently, "Are you okay?" He smiled. That same smile he wore when he first left, the one that said everything and nothing at all. Thomas had always been the strong one, the fixer, the healer. In the field, as a medic, he had been the lifeline for so many. Now, back home, he tried to carry everyone's joy on his shoulders, while burying his own pain. And buried deep beneath that pain was a secret that pressed against his ribs like a stone. His illness had no cure. The doctors had explained it clearly enough: an aggressive condition, likely from exposure during deployment. He had months, maybe less, but he didn't tell Lena, he didn't tell anyone. To him, keeping it hidden felt like an act of love. If he could spare them the slow decay, the hospital visits, the helplessness, then maybe he could give them a better goodbye. So he carried on. He took his son fishing. He helped Lena fix the broken fence. He read bedtime stories with a little extra care, his voice quieter now, but every act of normalcy felt borrowed. Every morning was another page in a chapter he was writing in secret. There were nights when he'd sit on the porch alone, staring at the stars like they were old friends. His breath would catch in his chest, not from pain, but from fear that he might leave without keeping the promise he had made long ago. He wore that fear like his old dog, tags always close, never seen. And yet, even in that quiet grief, Thomas believed he was doing the right thing, protecting them like he always had. But some truths have weight, and the longer they're hidden, the heavier they become. It had started in the desert, under the roar of helicopters and the grit of wind-blown sand. Martin Reyes had bled out in Thomas's arms, his closest friend, the one who had always joked too loud, who knew the names of every soldier's kid back home. Martin wasn't afraid to die, but he had one last request: take care of them and live for me. Thomas had nodded, not because he was ready, but because he knew Martin needed that promise to let go. It had haunted him ever since. Now, months later, the weight of those words grew heavier by the day. Thomas's body was betraying him faster than he expected. He'd begun to wake with fever, sometimes too weak to get out of bed. Lena noticed. Of course, she asked more questions. He deflected with soft lies and tired smiles. But one night, after the kids had gone to bed, he sat at the kitchen table with a pen and a stack of blank pages. He didn't write right away. He just stared, his hands trembling ever so slightly. Then he began the first letter to Lena. He wrote slowly, carefully, like every word had to carry his soul. He told her about Martin, about the promise, about the illness, about why he hadn't told her sooner. And he apologized not for dying, but for making her carry so much love without knowing how little time was left. Then he wrote to his son, Jamie, about how proud he was, about how bravery wasn't about fighting but about loving without fear. To his daughter Emma, he wrote about gentleness and how it held more power than people believed. Each letter became a small part of him that would remain, and still, it didn't feel like enough. So he set up the camera. He recorded a video, one message, for all of them. He didn't wear his uniform. He wore his favorite hoodie, the one Lena always teased him about. He wanted them to remember him not as a soldier, but as their Thomas, their dad, their husband, their friend. The hardest part wasn't facing the camera. It was the moment he looked into the lens and imagined their faces watching it one day. He had to stop halfway through to catch his breath, his voice breaking under the weight of what he couldn't protect them from anymore. Still, he finished it. He labeled the video and letters with simple instructions, to be opened after, and then he hid them in the back of the old record player cabinet, the one only he used. It felt wrong to hide it, but it felt even more wrong to leave without giving them something real. As his strength faded, the silence he'd clung to began to feel more like a wall than a shield, and he wondered maybe the bravest thing he could do wasn't to hold on, but to finally let them in. Thomas passed away on a quiet morning in early spring, the kind of morning where birdsong hums like a soft hymn and the light enters rooms gently, as if it knows grief is sleeping there. Lena had known something was wrong the night before. He'd held her hand tighter than usual. He kissed her forehead for longer, and when she looked into his eyes, there was a calm she hadn't seen in months, peaceful, almost like he'd finished something important. The days that followed were wrapped in silence and sobs, in casseroles from neighbors and whispered prayers. The kids didn't understand fully, only that their dad had gone somewhere they couldn't follow. Lena tried to hold them, but she was crumbling inside. It wasn't until a week later, while looking for a record to play something to break the stillness, that she opened the cabinet and found the envelopes. Her hands shook as she pulled them out, 3 letters and a small drive with his handwriting on it. She sat on the floor, surrounded by the ghosts of his voice, the warmth of his scent still lingering in the pages. And then, one by one, she read. Each letter was a soft unraveling of the man she loved. He had written with such tenderness, as if cradling their hearts even in goodbye. His words to Jamie gave the boy courage. To Emma, he offered comfort, and to Lena he offered everything. Memories, regrets, dreams, love that never once faltered, even in silence. Then came the video. She gathered the children, dimmed the lights, and pressed play. Thomas appeared on the screen with a small smile. No uniform, no staging, just him, in his worn hoodie, sitting on the porch they'd built together. His voice was quiet but steady. He talked about life, about love, about being scared, about the promise he made to Martin, and how he finally understood what it really meant not just to live, but to let others live with your truth. He told them it was okay to cry, that it was okay to miss him, but not to forget to laugh, to dream, to dance barefoot in the kitchen again. He ended with these words, "I kept the promise. Now it's your turn. Promise me you'll live with open hearts." The screen faded to black. The room was silent, except for Emma's tiny whisper, "I promise." From that moment on, they weren't just grieving, they were remembering, rebuilding, honoring. Lena took the kids to the field where Thomas and Martin had trained. There, beneath the wide sky, they spread his ashes, and in the wind, they felt him, not gone, just everywhere now. Some stories are not about the battles fought in the open, but the ones waged quietly in the heart. Thomas's journey reminds us that the deepest love sometimes lives in silence, and the bravest thing we can do is speak our truth before time slips away. In his final act, he gave his family not just goodbye but understanding, closure, and love that would carry them through the years. His promise lived on, not in medals, but in the way they chose to live after him. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs hope. Subscribe for more tales that touch the soul.